Welcome back to the Peak Property Performance Podcast. I am your host, Drew Hall, and today we are going to explore how student housing, which is one of the most operationally intense CRE asset classes, how it exposes the real value of data ownership, digital discipline, and execution consistency, especially in non-gateway markets. So it's not just me talking all by myself. Let's welcome some folks. So first up here is my co-host, Bill Douglas. Welcome, Bill.
Hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for listening. I'm going to introduce Tadros Abdelmalek. Say hey, Teddy.
Hey.
How's everyone? I always let you say hi before we get into the long intro. But also, before I introduce and tell you about Teddy, I want to remind you all to like, subscribe, share the podcast, because it's how we're spreading the word about the PPP movement. So I tell people this is not a book. This is a movement to own and control CRE data and digital infrastructures. And as an added bonus, if you think you'd provide value as a guest here, we welcome CRE thought leaders from all stages of ownership and operations, all sides. So just hit me up via LinkedIn or email. Contacts are always easy to find. So back to business. Today, we're joined by Tadros Abdelmalek, Senior Vice President of Business Development at HH Redstone. Teddy has spent more than 2 decades operating and scaling student housing portfolios across the U.S. with a deep focus on disciplined execution, owner-aligned management, and data-driven operations in margin-sensitive markets. Ouch. Teddy was also an early reader of Peak Property Performance when the book was released last summer. He reached out to me, and I think you got an advance copy. I think you even had one of the copies that was
I was one of the
before the
first.
release. Yeah. The early papers.
Maybe you were first time.
Yeah, I didn't know Teddy, and he reached out because the framework resonated with him. We had lunch in Kansas City, and he got the book, and he was seeing firsthand things that he shared. So firsthand things that resonated with me were weak data, fragmented systems, and poor digital discipline show up fast and get expensive quickly. So I like the way Teddy brings the practitioner's perspective on how data and digital strategy actually play out at the property level. Not buzzwords, not everything's AI, not you got to buy this, but as tools for occupancy, NOI protection, and operational resilience. So after that long intro, welcome to the show, Teddy. Thanks for giving us your time today.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Well, Teddy, let's start by talking about student housing and its relationship to the whole digital strategy that we really, circle all of our discussions around. It always comes back to data and digital infrastructure. But today, specifically for student housing, do you think that student housing surfaces operational blind spots faster than other asset classes do?
Yeah, student housing in of itself is an unforgiving asset class in real estate. They say on the leasing side, you miss a week, you might as well have missed a month of leasing. So all of those data points, everything that you're looking at to be more strategic and really be top of mind in regards to all your customers and your residents, really plays really heavily on the data side. And to Bill's point, it is really something that's not front and center when you're taking a look at maximizing your overall performance at your assets. It's sometimes an afterthought. Well, let's look at the data. Let's see what the data has to say. But if you don't have those systems in process, you can't track it in real time, right? And so, a little bit about myself. I've been in the industry for 20 years, 25 years, depending on, kind of that starting point. I started right out of college, but I did my undergrad in biology and chemistry. So it already made me an analytical thinker, and, the aspect of numbers and really figuring out that formula, if you will, never really scared me, from an operations standpoint. So I always figured this is what you're trying to get to. There has to be byproducts to get you there. It's this overall formula, and the more aspects and more data sets and more data points that you have, you're going to be able to get to that end product with a little bit more confidence than just kind of shooting something in the dark. So like I said, student housing is an unforgiving asset class. If your systems and your processes aren't aligned, it shows up pretty fast, right? More so than multifamily, because on multifamily, it's a revolving leasing cycle. Every single month, people are moving in. Every single month, people are moving out. In student housing, you have like a marathon to run, and then it's done. And then the new season starts in the following academic year. So if you miss that mark, it's unforgiving in that regard.
Yeah.
It doesn't give you a second chance. There'll be some immediate move-ins, but that is more like, the frosting than the actual substance of the cake, right? And so student housing operates on this compressed leasing calendar. You don't have 12 months to fix mistakes. You have a defined decision window, and once it's passed, it's gone. The resident journey in that regard is a little bit more complex. You have students, parents, guarantors, roommates, financial aid timing. That means there's a lot more data, a lot more touch points, and a lot more friction to ensuring that you're seeing the correct data day in and day out, right? What's causing a slowness in the velocity or in the traffic coming to your door? That could be a number of data sets, associated with your property. But I always say, leasing is a formula. And, if you need 100 leases and your closing ratio is 25%, which I would argue is low, then you would divide that 100% by 25%. And that's how many actual pieces of traffic you would need to achieve that amount of leases. So that in of itself is the formula.
Interesting. Well, okay, so given that the cyclical and compressed schedule of the leasing and turnover that you were just talking about, do you often see the fragmentation of data or even the gaps, the systems gaps or the gaps in the data itself? Do you see those things impairing the execution of the leasing, just like you're talking about?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, because, if you don't know what the issue is, if you don't know what the actual issue is, then you're implementing policies and procedures to circumvent those issues kind of blindly a little bit, right? You're just kind of trying to trial and error. And you're spending money on marketing that may or may not yield the customers that you want, right? For example, in student housing, we track the source by which the traffic comes through our door, right? And all too often, the people that are on site, it's a drop-down menu, Drew. So it's like, oh, how did you hear about us? Word of mouth. How did you hear? Word of mouth. And there's no structure. There's no structure to actually the person that's sitting behind that computer doesn't actually understand how important that source mechanism is. Because if all my traffic is coming from word of mouth, great, but what's that actually mean? Or if it's coming through the website, what does that actually mean? Can we drill down even further? So what our team does is, we actually are very intentional about following up on that source question. So obviously, if we're getting leases from a certain source, we want to double down on the marketing efforts associated with that source of that traffic, right? And so let's say it's from a resident referral, right? And we pick resident referral as a part of the source intake, right? When I'm visiting with that piece of traffic that came through the door, that prospect, I say, oh, who referred you? They'll say, oh, Bill referred us. Okay, I'm going to put down Bill. And if another one comes through and it's Bill again, me as a management company, maybe I should reach out to Bill and maybe solicit his experience so that I can double down on what he's doing and who he's talking to. Who is this Bill guy? Okay, maybe he's head of his student organization. Maybe he's a adjunct faculty member. Maybe he's a teaching assistant, right? Where is his reach? If he's referring people, why are people listening to Bill? You see the difference there versus me just picking a drop-down menu and moving on with my life, right? I wouldn't have been able to identify that as a point of contention on a pivotal piece within my leasing and marketing if I didn't ask follow-up questions and actually understand who this Bill guy was and be able to maybe reference and or establish a relationship with that referral source. And that is true of businesses. That's true of, maybe it's someone at the university that's referring traffic our way, or maybe it's an Instagram ad that was just, was clear and concise and people resonated well with that ad. And that is, as a result, is driving traffic through your doors.
Yeah, get this guy a mug or a t-shirt or on commission.
Put him on commission. No.
Or hire Bill, right? As a part of Bill.
Yeah, for sure.
Does that make sense? I mean, that's the secret sauce, really, at the end of the day.
It does. You're not assuming that the lead is just there. You're actually trying to find out where it came from and how you can replicate it more. Regardless of who Bill is, there's more Bills. How do I find more Bills? Yeah, I do follow that.
And sometimes you're doing an A/B comparison, right? And you guys know that. You're trying multiple things, but if you're not tracking ABC in a variety of different advertising techniques or implementation, you don't know which the A/B test, which one works better, right? And which one is converting, the conversion ratios. And, all too often we're only measuring the source. We're not measuring the percentage of people actually touring the model and then converting to applications. That is also a misnomer. No one in student housing is measuring that second piece. Like, how many of my tours that actually came to the property convert? How many are converting actually from just leasing online, right? And what's that mean? If you're not signing any leases after people come to the property, that's a clear indication that your sales process is messed up, right? And so I just loved it that the book, put that framework into an operating reality. It sounds great on paper, but until you've actually seen them in real time and implement them into your daily operations, that's the only way that kind of mindset works, right? The return can be there, but it's not transparent unless you track it.
Well, along that same line of, we call it PPP, right? Peak property performance, but PPP theory to operating reality. When you read peak property performance, what else felt familiar versus aspirational? What was pie in the sky versus this is concrete based upon your operating experience?
Yeah, something that I took away was how you reward structure is key into driving behavior at your property. And a lot of it is hiring a warm body versus hiring people that are actually invested into the asset itself. And sometimes that, you're rewarding discipline and it pushes wishful thinking, but you're not getting the result that you ultimately, need, or you're not converting correctly. So in student housing specifically, what resonated well was consistent follow-up, and matching that follow-up with a data set is key as well, and actually, obviously that translates into revenue, but there's guardrails there in regards to, how long you should follow up with someone, how many times do you want to bug them? And, the data shows that, you're not going to obviously close on your prospect within the first or the second conversation. It actually takes about 7 conversations deep to actually convert. So because they have so many questions and, they're investing a lot into your property. So in the real world, that's kind of what, resonated well with me. So,
Well, is it safe to, I don't assume anything. Is it safe to say that the guardrails and the data structure applies to operations too, not just on rev gen or sales or leasing?
of
You know,
course.
every business it's rev gen, right? But in student housing, it's going to be the leasing cycle that's inordinately compressed, as you explained. Isn't it
Absolutely.
applicable to operations as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Operations, the thing with operations is it's the engine by which you are interacting with your residents, right? It's what makes the machine go, but it's what I've been kind of referencing before is the secret sauce, in our industry is the resident experience. So blending the resident experience within your own operations. I mean, anyone can run a property, right? It's very like cyclical. You just run a property, but if you don't have that secret sauce, it almost seems like you're just running it without understanding the nuances associated with each of those assets. And I'll give you an example. You can have the best amenities, the best property, it looks great. And if you don't treat your residents as if they're the CEOs of the property, then it really doesn't matter, how great your property is. And that comes down to hospitality, comes down to customer service. And we've all experienced that, it's like this end all be all restaurant you want to eat at. And then the experience by which you come to realize that's at this restaurant, for example, is not even worth all the hype that it is. Right. And it's like, there are so many systematic things that you can measure to drive that customer service and drive that hospitality ranking even higher. And one thing that we do, that we've stolen from the hospitality industry is, it's called, oh man, I just blanked. It's called, man, I just lost the word.
I mean, take a second to think about it. They'll cut all these ums and ahs out. Don't worry about it. They're just little. It happens. Like, no, 'cause
Uh,
out, so it's fine, but whenever you come up with it again, just take a breath and we'll start.
So yeah, no, it's it's the word that I was thinking about is anticipatory service, right? And so in a restaurant, a waiter brings you two glasses of water regardless if you asked for them or not. But then again, if you look at the data, it heightens your level of satisfaction associated with the service that's being given. And in student housing and in real estate, if you can anticipate, the anticipatory service, if you can anticipate what your customers need before they actually need it, then you're going to be one step ahead of the resident experience.
Well, the resident experience is your, in a raw business sense, it's your defensible moat. It is your intellectual property. It's the culture that attracts you to get the margins that the business is running. And we talk all the time on the show and in the book about how technology can positively impact that, whether it's a direct line to revenue or whether it's faster leasing or more retention or more market resilience against other competitors with lower rents. It's all attributable to the bottom line. Is that also a fair statement?
Absolutely. What was really surprising about the book, Bill, was how many data points that I didn't even realize were available to an asset, right? You had your chart that you graciously gave at the end of the book, and it's like, wow, these are a lot of data points that you may just kind of shrug off as, oh, that's not important to measure. But if you look at it as an overall formula, it is important to understand kind of where that falls within the.
There's so much in the digital world. The data, it doesn't have to be just technology, but the technology is touching everything and everyone on the property. So that we like to call it the digital infrastructure, data and digital infrastructure, DDI domains. So there's 6 domains and there's a plethora of points behind them. So thanks for bringing that up, but it is arduous to get a hold of those, but it's always worthwhile. It's not something you go out in one day and get, put it that way. It's more of we're going to make this an initiative and do it all the time and update it. And over time, it just adds value and keeps adding value. So,
Of course.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, so let's think about some digital discipline here. I think it's fair to say, correct me if I'm wrong, though, in student housing, simplicity and reliability tend to win out over the feature-rich platforms, right? I mean, if one comes along, if feature-rich comes along for the ride, that's great. But really, that simplicity and reliability is such a focus in student housing. How do you decide which digital tools actually belong in a student housing portfolio versus the ones that just add noise?
Yeah. No, to your point, more tech doesn't always equal better performance. It's the tech that actually gives you clarity and supports your overall mission at the property, which I would argue is that resident experience. So anything that exhibits and heightens your resident experience is not a gimmick. Anything that supplements your overall resident experience as well, from an AI function, is supportive in that regard. I mean, to your point, the industry is just flooded with so many promising platforms. They'll do this, they'll do that. You'll be able to operate the property with one person, but it actually creates more friction ultimately, Drew. I mean, so many dashboards, so many logins, too many integrations. And that's a bottleneck that is just waiting to cause frustration at the property. No one wants to log into 10 different things. I mean, we need something that's systematic, that can drive the property to the promised land, and making sure that those aspects are clear and concise. That's the only way that it adds value. The best operators I've seen in the time that I've been in student housing, they have really clean reporting, and they have really clean reporting cadence. They have a weekly operating rhythm that is consistent. I say consistency by far is probably one of the most important things. If you're inconsistent, your data is going to tell you that, but then you can't really wrap your arms around what's going on. So, I mean, internally, you guys have to be consistent with what you do. It's great that, you're marketing, but if you're marketing inconsistently, it kind of, it doesn't lend itself to really telling you anything other than a bunch of noise, right? So it's like, consistency is the key in everything you're doing as well. So, but chasing new tech often masks the process of the problem. You're often just trying to find a quick solution to something that is pretty big, and if your discipline is pretty weak, no system is really going to save you. You kind of have to figure out what the overall issue is first, and figure out what your strategy is.
Yeah. It's interesting. It draws to mind, like we're working on something right now with a client who it's in a commercial real estate, multi-tenant, commercial tenants. But it has a lot of similarities here to just the student housing conversation because the platform at this campus is very feature rich. The tenants need it. They want it. It's the kind of exacting tenant that's looking for it. However, they're sort of tripping over management to get to the information, and management doesn't want to be involved. And so to your point, like feature rich, that's great. That's great. But the point here is for these guys being able to get the tenant for that tenant experience, being able to get the answers into their hands immediately when they need it. They don't want to have to go through a middleman in order to reach that information. And likewise, management doesn't want to be involved in that. They just want to turn those leases. They want to fill up that building. And so it's just one of the many ways that we, engage and say, that's interesting. It's not altogether different, but it kind of works its way out different based on this management company at that property for that tenant base. And so, not that everything's a one-off, but there's definitely some customizations out there where if you just turn that knob a tiny little bit, the returns are exponential. So it kind of feels like the same type of topic there.
I had 2
Yeah,
seconds there, Drew. Just I'd want Teddy's input. This industry has a very strong status quo bias, let's say. This is the way we do it. So, and we're only picking on this property because it's fresh, but we've seen it a lot over the past decade. Easy is the owner or property manager says we don't do technology, we just rent space. Well, now you can't just bifurcate technology. It is part of the offering. It is part of the experience. So to myopically look and say, we just want to go back to the old way in a property that's brand new is kind of baffling to me. How do you suggest we approach an owner like that, an operator? I mean, because the property manager is just managing multiple properties, not just one, right? Their leasing agent is dedicated there, but he is actually managing several things too. But the property manager has a staff and they're just used to doing things a certain way, and they don't want to take the time to understand the technology here, but it is knock it out of the park. It sets their building apart compared to the local market. So how would you approach it if you were trying to convince this property manager to take technology as the advantage, the differentiator, and drive it to the bottom line?
Yeah, there has to be something that is an aha moment, an epiphany for them. So I would look at, so what sort of data are you able to share with them that gives them a different lens of looking at their asset? So, obviously it's a brand new asset. They come with their own pivotal issues. Just because it's a brand new asset doesn't mean it's perfect by any means. But I would choose a different lens for them to kind of look through, something maybe that they're not necessarily aware of. And that could be, for example, utility usage within their vacant units, right? If it's a lease up, obviously they have vacant units earlier on in the development cycle, or, in that early part, and how much revenue is actually being lost to vacant units, right? It's sight unseen. They probably don't even care about it. They're more worried about occupancy. And that could be a pivotal angle into a new development, for example. But to your point, when we met, starting on the ground level and starting with the developer and implementing those systems at the ground level, I think is key to getting people on board initially. If you're able to implement them, from day one, then it'll be that much easier.
Well, they were implemented, and then ownership and property management changed. The building was traded.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, and it's been open like 10 months, and it's just interesting. It almost doesn't matter what the consistency of the building is, but we see a large part of commercial real estate say, I mean, AI is changing the conversation, but a large part of them says, we don't do technology. The tenants can deal with it on their own. And I just think it's an integral part, especially if you have a congruent technology offering in a property. It's an integral part of the user experience that you talk so passionately about, right? That's our special sauce.
Yeah, absolutely. What was it specifically that they wanted to do away with?
Providing ubiquitous connectivity all over the property, or giving somebody the ability to this is business tenant environment, right? To integrate their own systems to make them mobile throughout the beautiful campus, as opposed to letting them sit inside their space, confining each tenant organization to their leased space.
Instead of a community experience, ultimately.
Yeah, basically moving their, making their experience mobile, safe, secure, private, they just don't want to deal with it, but it's built in and generates income and saves the tenant money. So they like the numbers, don't want to chase the numbers. I don't have the time for that, right? I'm too busy.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, unfortunately, that's, we see that all the time, that, the pain of transitioning to something new is always a roadblock because they think it's harder, but they don't actually see that the fruits of those labors will actually pay out substantial dividends. So I think it's an educational piece at that point, right? How do you train that environment to understanding that being able to offer something like that is actually worthwhile?
And I will say too, I mean, even when we have buy-in from ownership gets it enough to where they say, "I know for a fact this works at all levels, especially on the financial level," which is what they really care about.
Yeah.
Tenants are happy, everybody's happy. But when you transition into the management side of things, that's where we're seeing that resistance. And I will say one of the things that I feel like we've really focused on is trying to encourage those management teams to view us as an extension of their team. Like when a tenant asks a technical question, instead of feeling like that's friction, just think of it like you're turning your chair to someone on our team that happens to be however transparent you want it to be. It doesn't matter. You want us to wear a t-shirt or a hat of yours, that's fine. We can do that. But otherwise, we're always available to, enable those discussions. So we don't want them to feel like it's a difficult gap, like, oh, technology's so bad, but rather to see us as I hate to say a trusted partner, but I do mean like just another team member right on the other side of that wall or that cube right there. That's us. We're on your team. So it's not always easy. It's not as easy as it sounds like it could
Well,
be.
to be clear, it's a beautiful case study because the ownership reduced their build costs by aggregating networks. One of the core things we talk about. Imagine if you own and control your digital infrastructure. So they do. They own and control the entire digital infrastructure, and they control the data and all the integrations and connections to all those systems, and they control the user experience. It's a new property manager that doesn't want to deal with new. So we didn't plan on bringing that up, but Drew did, and I was like, let's just get Teddy's opinion on this.
No, like I said, the only way that you're going to be able to change their mind is that it lends itself to a better property management experience. It eases their burden on the property as well. Maybe it gives them a leg up to doing something different, right? When we visited, I really labeled, you and your company as the business intelligence portion of property management. As we are looking at creating relationships on the development side, I brought you up and I said, hey, we need to understand from day one how this property is going to be positioned from a data standpoint, right? And so when we're talking to these big institutional grade owners, that is probably the last thing on their mind. But it's like, we need to be able to track this so that we know who we're going after in regards to our customer and what the property is capable of doing. And if it's not capable of doing something, we can implement certain things from a business intelligence standpoint. And I think that there's so many different words and the nomenclature associated with AI and technology. A lot of people get lost in all of that, but I likened it to business intelligence, and a lot of people really understand exactly what that is, right? It's the intelligence behind the business itself, right? And I think you guys should use that as your frame of reference and your tag word when you're talking about really bringing up, the ability to kind of increase what's going on at these real estate assets.
Well, we do enjoy talking about it as building intelligence, not just holding like building intelligence. Like we're your human intelligence for your building intelligence. Like we have a lot of play with that. But I was gonna ask you a question here, and I think you just answered it. But for owners looking to grow their student housing portfolios, what's one discipline they need to place before adding any units?
What is one discipline that they need to add? I think that, they need to, I mean, as with anything, right? You need to understand the market, but the real estate of tomorrow is it's not going to be about market momentum. It's going to be about hands-on management, resident experience, and operational excellence. So, and those three things are directly related to how you're actually running the property, right? And if you don't know how well you're running the property and where your trenches are, then you're bound to make the same mistakes, day in and day out. So
We talk about that a lot on here. The unknown is actually more dangerous than the problem I don't know I have could kill me, but the one I know I'm working on could just be expensive and slow, but I'm going to solve it.
correct.
But until you ask the question, you don't know the answer. So what I hear you saying is know what you don't know now going forward before you
Or just
any
be willing to be vulnerable, and instead of just acting like you know everything, right? Lean in on experts that obviously have been in the space for quite a while. And some of that will transcend to making a good decision with all the data that you have versus making a decision haphazardly, to tell you the truth.
Well, we do appreciate you bringing us into those other conversations. Everybody learns every time we do it because every asset is unique, but the process is the same. So
Yeah.
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 much appreciated, Terry.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I would say the process isn't easy by any means. I mean, there's an investment on that side, and the conversations aren't easy because it's not something that's tangible, if you will. It's all of this knowledge that's built into your property that you actually have to extract. And sometimes that's even the most difficult conversation to have, is extracting that data. And I understand you were telling me, hey, we could do it, you could do it, but whoever has the time to do it themselves at the end of the day.
That's why the company exists. But the key point you made there is it takes an investment, and the key word is investment because it's not an expense, it's an asset, and our asset should generate a return. If it doesn't, then there's a problem with the formula, the implementation, the strategy, or something. So key point is investment is not an expense. This industry is used to investing in sticks and bricks and windows and facades.
Mhm.
Technology and data and digital are also investments. They've been a large expense burden for decades, and we believe they should always be an investment and asset generating income for the property. So I'll get off my pulpit. We're very passionate about that because we've done it so many times.
Yeah.
We're just good at it.
Let me add this, the students and the parents and the customers of tomorrow are very well traveled, and their expectations are even very much heightened. And if you don't know how to serve that kind of customer, then you're already behind the eight ball of sorts, right? And if you're not able to attract a customer like that, I mean, the students are already traveling and staying at 5-star hotels and have experienced so many things before they even get to us. And that's why I say the customer experience is very valuable from that standpoint. But if you don't know how to cater to them, you're already behind. And so being able to track what that experience should look like, right? For Gen Z, for example, Gen Z in of itself, I just had a conversation earlier with a colleague. They care about the overall experience and the memories that are going to be made, not the actual product that is received, right? And so they care about creating memories, creating experiences, creating lifelong friendships, and that's what your property should be slated to do when we're talking about student housing or multifamily.
I
So
love it.
Yeah, that's very cool. Yeah. All right, Teddy, before we wrap up, we always like to take our guests here at the end of the podcast to what we call the extra floor. So you've listened to us, so you know this. We've got these short questions, just gut level responses. There's no such thing as a right or wrong answer, just whatever comes to your mind. So number one, what is a book or a podcast that has shaped how you think?
what is a book or a podcast that has shaped how I think? Really a podcast that I consistently listen to is The Diary of a CEO. It trends well with kind of my philosophy. I always say that the residents are our CEOs, because, in the hierarchy of everything, the word landlord, it goes all the way back to the ancient times. And, that hierarchy should be reversed, instead of us, kind of being the landlord versus the tenant. But the diary of the CEO lends itself to just asking thought-provoking questions and really, crossing the line, if you will, to really generate some really thought-provoking responses. And he has a variety of different guests, everyone from, government officials to, astronomers. So it's just it's a podcast that I just enjoy listening to. It's very raw, to tell you the truth. So are you familiar with that one?
I'm not. No.
Oh, that's great. That's
too.
probably a temporary answer. Yeah, you're intriguing me. All right. Well, what's the best piece of career or life advice that you've ever received?
Kindness is the most underrated skill in business. Most of the deals that cross the line and get inked are because of the interactions that we've had, with those people, the real interactions. It's not really about the deal itself, but it's how we treat, both our customers, our clients. And I would say kindness is one of the most underrated skills.
When you're not working, what do you love to do that recharges you?
Oh yeah. So I have two little ones. So it's always a pleasure to them running at me, when I'm either picking them up from daycare or and really in real estate, I've been always working towards my own professional development. And then when I had kids, it's almost like the entire shift of my focus went to my children, right? And it's almost like I'm protecting the legacy for my children, the same way that, owners of real estate are protecting the legacy of their own. So it's like someone with the same mindset should definitely be, trying to, bring value, right, to the overall scenario. So
Love it. The last one's super simple. Are you an early bird or a night owl?
I've been known to be a night owl most of the time, but in my aging years, I'm actually more of an early riser because of the kids. So, I can be up as early as, 4:30, 5 a.m. Not by my own accord. I'll say that. But I do love, being a night owl.
Drew and I each have 2 kids, and we can completely relate with everything you just said. Not gonna add to it. I'm just nodding in.
And they're attached, Bill. They're attached.
It is the biggest blessing ever.
Yeah,
For sure.
It is the.
yeah, my son is 3 and my daughter is about to be 2. So you can imagine if you can recall those ages. I think you said your children are grown up now, right?
29 and 31. Yeah. Drew's got some high schoolers.
Yeah, I got a 15 and a 16. Yeah, so I remember.
You remember back to 3 and 2 years old?
Oh, I do. The scars are not all external.
Oh gosh, I love the 3. All the questions that come with the 3. What that? It's so much.
I'll do it myself.
Yeah.
So very, very independent.
All right, Teddy, this will be in the show notes, but how could our listeners reach out to you if they want to?
Yeah, they can access me on LinkedIn very easily, Teddy Abdelmalek, but, even my email is pretty easy, teddy@hhredstone.com. More than happy to have a conversation if you're having any sort of property management issue or you just want to talk strategy. We have a number of professionals within our field that have seen a lot of different things in property management, so don't hesitate to reach out if you need something.
Fantastic. Well, Teddy, to you again, we say thank you. Thanks so much for joining us today. We really appreciate this conversation. And then to our listeners and viewers, thanks as well. Thanks as always for joining us here. And be sure to follow, like, and subscribe. And until then, we'll see you on the next episode of Peak Property Performance. Thanks, everyone.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.